Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to the Daiwa Anglo-Japanese Foundation. So my name is Jason James, and just before we start, I have to do a few housekeeping announcements. The first one is if the fire alarm goes off this evening, please don't use the lift. You've got to go down the stairs, we go outside the front door and cross over and wait on the park side of the street. And the second thing is, please don't leave any valuables in our cloakrooms downstairs because nobody's monitoring those. So if you've got a laptop or something, it's better to pop down and keep it up here with you. So this evening we're going to be talking about foreign migrant workers in Japanese agriculture, which may seem a slightly niche topic, but it is of course very important as part of the broader question of how migrants are gradually being assimilated into the Japanese population. And today, to speak to us about that subject is Glenda Roberts. Well, she's done a great number of things in her academic career, so it's quite difficult to summarize them all, but she's been a specialist in Japanese social science throughout her career. She has affiliations with various universities, but her longest standing one was her professorship at Waseda University, where she was from 1998, and she was also involved in setting up the journal Social Science Japan Journal. And she's now based in Hawaii, which we're all very jealous about, and is affiliated to the East-West Center and the Center for Japanese Studies at the University of Hawaii, and the Center for Japanese Studies at the University of Michigan. So I'll leave my introduction at that, and over to you, Glenda. Well, it's up to you. Probably it's easier from there because then we'll be able to see the whole slide.
There? Is it okay? Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so happy to be here. Haven't been in London for a long time, and I think this is the first time I've ever spoken for the Daiwa Anglo-Japan Foundation, and I'm very happy to be here tonight, so thank you.
Could we ask for the noise to be slightly louder?
Louder? Maybe I just need to speak up.
Yeah, I think that's something we have to deal with here, isn't it?
No, that's for the live stream. If you just maybe pin it up a bit.
Sorry to be a nuisance.
No. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Okay. So tonight, I'm speaking about stakeholders' views on foreign migrant workers in Japan's agriculture. And this research I've been doing with Dr. Noriko Fujita since 2018, and I'd like to introduce it to you. So Japan is in a period of strong demographic decline, which is forecast to continue at least until 2060. There are labor shortages across the spectrum, from the highly educated and skilled to manual labor that requires less training. But up until recently, the Japanese government, while creating schemes that open paths to permanent residence for the gifted and talented, has not opened such paths for long-term residency of lesser skilled manual laborer migrants. In a nod to increasing labor shortages in 14 categories of work, including farming and fisheries, however, in 2019, a short-term bona-fide labor scheme called Specified Skilled Worker was enacted to meet the labor demand in fields heretofore largely inaccessible to foreign labor. My position as a member of the Ministry of Justice's Advisory Council for Immigration Control led me to decide to do fieldwork on farmers' perspectives on these new policies. I wondered how they would be met on the ground, how the actual operations would unfold, and how farmers and their communities would react to these increasing opportunities to hire foreign workers for ever longer periods of time. In other words, in this research, I was concerned about the possibility of social inclusion for workers who come from myriad countries in the region and who now had the possibility to become long-term residents, even citizens if they so desired. In this talk, I will briefly mention our methodology for the research. I'll then introduce the background, the reasons behind farmers hiring foreign workers, the structures of the programs, their local implementations, and the changes in programs since we began the research in 2018. Then I'll focus on farmers and other local stakeholders' views on how these programs should be organized going forward. What is their hope for foreign workers in their communities? Are they prepared to live alongside them as fellow residents in the long term? Our research points to areas that will need to be addressed before this new form of labor importation can become a sustainable reality. So here we go. This is our methodology. With fellow researcher Noriko Fujita, I conducted fieldwork in Aichi and Kyoto prefectures from December 2018 to September 2024. We conducted 46 interviews with employers and wives of arable and livestock farmers, temporary employment agencies, presidents of local community associations, local government officials, and officials of the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry, and Fisheries. Moreover, we participated in locally run, free of cost Japanese language programs for foreign workers and discussion groups for information exchange run by farmers. We chose those prefectures as our field sites because both prefectures were involved in the Toku projects of Foreigners for Agricultural Support, an interim program the government introduced in 4 prefectures before beginning the Specified Skilled Workers Program. Although the farms in Aichi had hired none from the supporters program, a Kyoto dispatcher who operates both this program and SSW clarified that the Toku scheme can be seen in between TITP and SSW schemes. Therefore, fieldwork in these particular 2 prefectures provided us with good insights to compare all the systems and practices. In addition, Kyoto and Aichi were more similar in terms of the scale of their economies, where in both prefectures, manufacturing industries lead the economic activities, and the average per capita income level is almost par with the national level, although Aichi Prefecture's economy, due to the auto industry, is much bigger than that of Kyoto Prefecture. The minimum hourly wages in Aichi and Kyoto prefectures in 2024 were 1,077 yen and 1,058 yen, respectively. And the wages have been steadily rising. Our most recent fieldwork was in September 2024 in Aichi. So for background, why do farms need foreign labor? First, this is just some of the diversified kinds of farms which we studied. Okay. The labor shortage has been especially increasing in agriculture. It is mainly caused by an aging population, which is occurring nationwide, but more seriously in the countryside, where the majority of agricultural fields are located. The out-migration of youth also contributes. The average age of farmers is now 69 years old, and the number of core persons in farming, as you'll see from this graph, has dropped from over 20 million in 2010 to just over 11 million in 2024. Almost all the farmers we interviewed felt hopeless about the shrinking workforce. They have fewer successors, few young farmers doing business-oriented startups, and the realities of the aging society are seen in the growing numbers of abandoned farms and in the aging faces of their fellow rural inhabitants. Prices of their products fluctuate, and farmers cannot get better prices easily. Agriculture is not where the value added is. The dependence on global sources for basic farm supplies is high, but supply chains were upset by COVID-19, making production costs considerably higher. As we learned in the interview in September 2024, input costs have only increased with the steady devaluation of the yen against the dollar, as well as the inflation of the costs of imported inputs, aside from the exchange rate. Farmers are pinched by heightened costs for imports on the one hand and by difficulties in raising the prices for their crops on the other hand. The farmers with whom we spoke were quite anxious about their futures. When viewing their assets and land holdings, in some cases multiple high-tech greenhouses as well as expanded dry field land holdings and spacious homesteads inherited from their ancestors, expensive tractors and late model cars, one might assume that farming vegetables and flowers is quite lucrative. Yet the truth is more complicated. What we've learned is that in the past 20 to 30 years, the farmers in Aichi and Kyoto have indeed expanded their holdings and invested greatly in their farms, yet the labor shortage in agriculture, as well as a mindset among the younger generation that values more balance in work and life, has threatened the existence of these farms. In response to this, the government recognized the need to bring foreign labor into Japan's farms. Here we go. These are some of the labor migration schemes for Japan's agriculture. So Japan's first foray into allowing farmers to hire foreign labor was this first one, the blue one, Technical Intern Training Program, which began in 1993. Many of the farmers we interviewed in Aichi had been utilizing the system to bring in workers on this short-term visa from the early 2000s. In 2021, there were 324,940 TITP workers in Japan, of whom about 10% were in the agricultural sector, the fourth largest percentage among Japan's industrial sectors utilizing these workers. They hailed largely from Southeast Asia and China. The number increased to well over 425,000 by year's end 2024. Since its inception, here's those graphs. Since its inception, the TITP system became a backbone source of unskilled labor without raising the hackles of those who fear a rise in immigration because their status was that of trainee, not worker. The government couched the program under the rubric of technical transfer to developing countries, and limitations were placed on trainees' job mobility, job contents, and length of residency. Over the years, however, there was increasing media, social activist, and scholarly attention on exploitation and abuses inherent in this system. So this led to legal revisions to further protect the trainees, eventually leading to the abolishment of the TITP system recently. Instead, the government will begin a new program from 2027 called the Employment for Skill Development Program, Ikusei Shuro, or ESD, okay? And I'll discuss the ESD a little bit later. But let's talk about the specified skilled workers down here. In December 2018, the Abe administration passed a revision of the Immigration Control and Refugee Recognition Act to allow foreigners in 14 sectors to enter Japan to work in semi-skilled labor as specified skilled worker, SSW. This is a genuine front door, short-term labor scheme, unlike TITP. For the first time, the government used the term worker, not trainee, expecting them to be so-called immediate fighting power. The SSW program began in April 2019. While the program was interrupted to an extent by the COVID pandemic, it's now gaining steadily in numbers. In December 2022, right after the pandemic, there were 130,915 SSW1 workers in Japan, of whom about 10% were in the ag sector, the second largest percentage among Japan's industrial sectors utilizing these workers. But by December 2024, the total number was 283,634, including almost 30,000 workers in the agricultural sector, accounting for about 10% of all SSW workers. So, and I'll give you the slide. Okay. Those from Vietnam accounted for almost half now, with Indonesians at almost 19% and Filipino and Myanmar workers about 10% each. So the blue is Vietnam. So they have overwhelmingly taken over the sector. It used to, in the old days, it was more people from China coming in these TITP program. But China, it has developed. It's no longer a developing nation, and people don't need to go to Japan to work on the farms. And Vietnam has taken the place. There's only a small number of Chinese now. So as of June 2024, okay, this is important. What about the SSW2 workers, the ones who can stay long-term and perhaps become even citizens someday if they want, or at least get long-term residency? They've only just begun to come on board. You have to finish SSW1 before you become SSW2. So, and then you have to take a difficult exam, and your language has also a language exam that you have to take, which is difficult. So as of June 2024, 188 people had passed the exam for SSW2 in the agricultural sector, okay? So they're already coming on board. 100, I was surprised to see this myself, actually. Because no doubt this number will grow as SSW1 workers finish their contracts. Right? So while not replacing TITP, the SSW program gives significantly more autonomy to workers and extends their stay in Japan beyond the maximum 6 years to up to 5 years more. That's SSW1 is 5 years. And to permanent residency and family reunification. This is what is so important here with SSW2. If you pass those exams, you can bring your family in. Initially, SSW2 was only operating in construction and shipbuilding sectors, but in 2023, the SSW2 program was extended to the agricultural sector. Workers qualify for the status by taking written exams, skill and language exams. And this brings us to our research questions. Okay. So what meaning does the system change carry regarding Japan's opening up to low-skilled labor migration in the farming sector? And what sort of labor migration do farmers and other stakeholders envision? And is this sustainable? Okay. So let's think about farmers' views of the schemes. We start with the comments of an elderly fruit farmer in Aichi, whom we interviewed in June 2021. He had hired TITP workers for 15 years. He had been expecting one Cambodian worker to come to his farm on the TITP scheme, but they had been delayed due to the COVID pandemic. We asked him if it would be problematic if they couldn't come, and he agreed it would be. We pointed out that he had not hired workers from abroad before this program began. Why would it be so difficult now? He replied, well, if they don't come this time, then they don't. But right now, there is some unskilled tanjun work, I guess you'd call it, and I've become an old man. It's true, I used to do that kind of heavy work up to now, and hiring people is quite stressful, but I can really count on what they will do for me. Even my son, today, he might want to go out with his friends or go to the doctor's office, or he might have something he has to do for the town office. I can't tell how much time he won't be spending on work. But they, the TITP workers, are definitely going to be there, and they will work. Even in an emergency, I can count on it. But I do have to get things all ready for them to do the work. And then later in the interview, he commented on other farmers' utilization of the TITP program. And he said, that is, even if you're not a farmer, everybody has become old. Amongst them are elderly gents who are all alone, but they still want to plant the rice and till the fields. So they bring in several TITP workers and leave everything, even spraying, to them. He then explained that in the first year of hiring a TITP worker, he doesn't make much profit hiring them. But from the second year, he can leave many things up to them and just tell them to do it. And they say, okay. In the first year, he would ask them to bring a bucket, and they wouldn't know the meaning of bucket. He noted that some farms hire 3 workers, where the one who has done the jobs for 3 years becomes the leader who instructs the second and first year TITP workers. So while he previously had hired part-time women from the community for some of these jobs, this labor source has dried up. And anyway, he noted, hiring a local worker amounted to a loss of one's family's privacy. So what can we learn from this narrative? First, indeed, these workers are asked to do simple but tiring work that the farmer's sons cannot be relied upon to do, and that the farmer himself is too old to do anymore. Yes, workers need to learn how to do the tasks, but once learned, they are even asked to lead the inexperienced workers. The farmer emphasizes that TITP workers are in place, living on the property, and have no excuses not to do the work, as his sons have. And indeed, many farmers have told us their workers want to work as much as possible to pay back their debts and send remittances home. Furthermore, the community is aging so rapidly that farmers can't get the work of farming done without the labor power of these migrants. This leads us to the Immigration Service Agency's creation of the status to replace TITP, the Employment for Skills Development Program, this one. As we can see, the thrust remains that the system is based on the notion of skill development, but the notion of technical transfer to developing countries is gone. The base is now ESD, and then SSW1, and finally SSW2. But skills development implies increases in wages and responsibilities. How would this work in farming? As it currently stands, farmers pay only a small premium for TITP3 and SSW workers, about 100 yen per hour over the prefectural minimum wage. It's not a substantial difference from the TITP, the basic worker, nor is their daily work much differentiated. When we inquired about opportunities for SSW workers to be promoted, we were met with surprise. The prospect had not occurred to the farmers. Some farmers did agree that if workers had credentials, such as driver's licenses, however, they could then use the farm equipment to drive on the public roads among the various land holdings of the farmer, and it would be much more convenient. Moreover, other farmers told us that if workers had writing skills and computer skills so that they could note down the greenhouse settings and take daily logs, that would be good. Leadership skills would also be useful, but they're already being practiced after only 2 or 3 years on the farms. The fact is that because SSW is basically thought of by farmers as a short-term scheme, they're not thinking of investing in a higher level of skills training so that workers could have an upward trajectory in the farming management field. What we've learned from the farmers in relation to the skill issue is that the necessary skills can be learned in a year or so on the job. Requiring workers to pass elaborate skill tests and higher level language tests only serves to keep down the number of workers who qualify for the higher status. The government, however, clings to the rhetoric of skills. Either one is developing a skill, as in the coming ESD program, or one is already the holder of a specified skill. This insistence on skills proven by tests only prolongs the number of years a worker could stay in Japan without access to permanent residency status and the mobility it would afford. ESD plus SSW1 equals 8 years. It seems to nod to the reality that farms need foreign workers, while simultaneously assuring that actual settlement is far off on the horizon. Okay. In our discussion in 2024, one farmer questioned whether the SSW2 was not in fact a kind of immigration policy, which the late Prime Minister Abe insisted that it was not. Okay, so Farmer B said to us, they made the SSW2 status because of the view that not allowing family reunification is a violation of human rights. But in actual fact, passing the SSW2 exam is quite a high hurdle from what I hear, he said. And then Farmer C said, but that's fine, right? And Farmer A said, I think we could say, if you've finished SSW1, then that's the end. But that's a different argument, since we have gradually put in place a kind of immigration policy without discussion. It's the argument of, do we really need that policy? You know? Okay. So the lack of need for advanced skills of farm workers is another reason for farmers' hesitation to implement SSW2 and welcome workers for the long term. Currently, farmers' sons are the ones who perform the more skilled work. One might ask, couldn't the workers go on indefinitely in jobs that require lower levels of skill and no step up? The problem with this is that it could lead to the development of an underclass. Farm wages are not high to begin with. The farmers we studied wondered how foreign workers could manage to raise children on these very basic salaries. Farmers themselves asserted they cannot afford to pay much more than they currently pay, or they would just stop farming altogether. One dispatcher told us, while SSW2 workers would be earning more income than in their home countries, their consumption would also rise to meet the higher living standard, and educations of the 1.5 and second generation would suffer due to suboptimal language acquisition, circular migration, and low income levels. He feared that without paths to social mobility, including access to decent education with Japanese as a second language, workers and their families would end up ghettoized and ill-content, causing friction with local communities. Aside from the reason that years of skill development aren't needed for workers in farming, some farmers also resist the idea of SSW2 in farming because they fear that harmony in the community would be disrupted by the presence of long-term migrant families. Indeed, rural Japan isn't known for welcoming strangers to live alongside them, even fellow Japanese people. The farmers evidenced reluctance to embrace the notion of welcoming SSW2 migrants into their communities. Farmer A above recognized SSW2 as an immigration policy. From whence does his hesitation spring? In our research, we identified several challenges. Here's one of them. Disjuncture with the family farming model of labor management. So in the TITP system, to which farmers have become accustomed over decades, the farm household is totally responsible for workers' livelihood support, including housing, work allocation, and healthcare, emotional labor, such as settling disputes, and support for language education. Some farmers even take their workers on holiday trips to visit hot springs or touristic locations. A few even attend the weddings of their workers in their home countries after they have finished their contracts and returned home. As we elaborated in previous papers, this is the labor model of family farming. It is seen as a wet and not dry human relationship. Workers are considered as ko, or children, and are treated as such, part of the family. While under TITP, the farmers have more control over their employees. Under SSW, workers are dispatched to farms. The workers are supposed to already possess the necessary job skills and to have acquired enough language to be more independent. Now that SSW2 is a reality, however, a worker who passes the skills and language test would be allowed to stay on in the community beyond the 3 years of ESD and 5 years of SSW1. And this is worrisome to the farmers because they do not want to cause meiwaku. They don't want to impose burdens on the community. Okay. So in our interview of September 2024, Farmer C noted his views on family reunification. This is what he said. If they brought their children, it would cause inconvenience. So I would not dare to choose that worker to work on my farm. When I inquired what he meant by inconvenience or meiwaku, he replied, well, it would affect the city hall, the school, and even the local children's association. To this, the city official replied, it's not meiwaku. It's just a handicap in terms of Japanese language education. Then Farmer B replied to the official, I'm sorry to say this, but the thing is, you can't provide them enough support. Before the city can do anything for us, we have to do it, he continued. In other words, the first people to realize that workers need support will be the farmers, and they will have to take action immediately before the city is ready to assist, or they will have to respond to gaps in the system of provision of support. While the city officials are trying to set up a system to accept and welcome foreign residents, and they seem to be quite positive toward this challenge, this is going to take time. It's not immediate. And in the meantime, farmers are the ones that workers will turn to. As Farmer A stated, eventually there was a trend from technical training to specified skilled worker. Technical internship was not a dry employee, but more like family in the case of farmers. When trainees or SSW workers got married or had children, they had children back home, it became an event in everyone's family. It's hard to simply say, oh, really? When the front door, okay, I think I have one more slide here. Yeah. When the front door of SSW2 opens and the foreigner who would have been accepted as a child has a child and spouse of their own, Their children will need to attend daycare and schools. Their own family needs will become more complex. And the workers who up to now have given total dedication to their job on the farm may need to spend less time on the farm and more time assisting their families. Hence, from the farmer's point of view, worker management could become more difficult. Also, because the workers' families would need a great deal of support from the public, such as language assistance for the schools and in clinics for multiple languages, farmers felt this would cause disruptions, such as foreign children who couldn't keep up with the lessons in the same classroom with the local children, for which local people would hold the farmers responsible. Furthermore, in an earlier interview with a farmer's wife, we learned that she hesitated to have foreigners with their families living directly in her village because householders have obligations to support community events and religious festivals, and she thought that foreigners, who are not from Japanese culture after all, would not fulfill that obligation. Okay. So in conclusion, given the views of the farmers with whom we have had discussions to date, it is possible that most farmers will not choose to hire people in the SSW2 status, at least not yet. Okay, not yet. For the reasons we've stated in this talk, SSW2 may not be easily adapted in farming communities, at least not until farmers have confidence that City Hall will be able to respond to the migrants' myriad needs. But as an immigration status, it certainly would be appropriate for other sectors where there is a more robust skill ladder, like in construction, and where the seniority promotion system would make more sense as workers assumed more responsibility and leadership. In farming, even if workers had the funds, it would not be easy to purchase the land to farm, and this is true for Japanese farmers, not to mention foreigners. One has the sense that the long-term settlement of foreigners in these communities will proceed much more slowly than the settlement of workers in other sectors and in urban areas. One hopes that with the creation of the Immigration Services Agency, there will be increased funding and systematic focus on the needs of foreign migrants, whatever industries they work in, so that their sojourns in Japan, whether short or long, will be well spent and worthwhile to the migrants, their employers, and the communities alike. Certainly, the future of Japan's agriculture rests in large part on foreign migrant labor. And thank you so much for listening. Well,
Still plugged in.
I don't know. No, I'm not plugged in anymore.
Right. Okay, well, that gives us plenty of time, I think, for Q&A. I mean, obviously, this is not directly related to the research you've just been talking about, but I was struck by your statistics that, I mean, the average age of farmers is 69. And obviously, there is an increasing number of abandoned farms.
That's right.
So that must be giving the government increasing concerns about food security.
Absolutely,
I wonder if you could
yes.
just say a few words about that issue.
Well, it's not very high. The percent of food security is getting lower and lower. I can't, off the top of my head, tell you what it is right now. I think it's quite low.
Right.
Maybe under 5%.
And presumably from the government's point of view, that's an important reason why
Absolutely,
they're introducing
yes.
these migrants rather than letting the farms disappear.
That's right. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, you know, you need to have food in the country in case something happens. And these people are real farmers. Okay. I mean, some of them are doing flowers and, you know, that kind of crop, which you don't think of as necessary perhaps, but many of them are also doing vegetables, dairy, you know, chicken farms, and all kinds of things that Japanese people need to have there in Japan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely a problem. And what I want to also say is, you might hear some people say that there is an interest among young people now to start a farm, okay? And there are also many retirees from, like salarymen retirees who decide to start a farm, like, you know, in their retirement. But actually neither of those groups is producing a whole lot of products, right? They're not used, usually they're not used to farming, and they're just doing it for like a lifestyle kind of farming. I'm sure there are some of them who do it for business, but these farmers were rather critical of those people. Yeah. So,
Okay, so let's take some questions from the floor. Who would like to kick things off? Yes, Joy's back there.
Hi, Linda.
Hi, Joy.
Thank you.
Great to
Joy,
see
sorry.
you.
Great to see you too. I was wondering about what used to happen quite often was that farmers' sons couldn't find wives, so there was quite a lot of material about wives coming in from other countries to marry. Is it not working?
I think just don't hold it too close.
Is that better?
Yeah.
Does that work?
Can you tell us what the question was? Sorry.
Okay, well, I think
She hasn't.
she hasn't quite finished it yet, so I will.
Is that how it should be? Is that better? Does that work now?
Yeah.
Okay, so there used to be wives coming in to marry sons who couldn't find wives who wanted to be on
Right.
farms. But the way what you've just presented seems to be of people coming in as individual single farmers and then perhaps bringing their families. Are
Right.
they completely separate from the Japanese farming community, or is there intermarriage as there used to be? It was in Tohoku, I think, the work that I remember. It was quite a long time ago.
That was Liba Fair's work, right? I think she was talking about women from the Philippines coming
Yes,
into
that-
Japan and marrying.
Yeah, there was somebody
You
else.
got the
but
question, okay?
Oh,
Sorry.
Doesn't matter.
no.
All right.
Oh. Okay. There is less of that now than there was then. I think for one thing, the government pretty much shut down local governments' efforts to try to get brides from abroad. There were some local governments who were trying to get brides from abroad, and they would like get a whole, a number of farmers who wanted to marry somebody, and they would send them on 2-week trips to wherever, the Philippines or China, to and try to match them, do these matchmaking things. And well, local governments received a lot of criticism for that, and as a kind of human trafficking kind of criticism, and also it's just really difficult for those foreign women to adjust to this. It's not easy, and that's why it's not easy. That's why there aren't so many Japanese women wanting to marry these guys anymore, because it's a really hard life. All right, I've interviewed the Japanese farmers' wives, and I'm telling you, it's a hard life. It still is a hard life. I don't know if any of you read, there was a book by Gail Bernstein a long time ago called Haruko's World, and she talks about that woman working from morning until night and just fingers to the bone, I mean, it's really difficult. It's not much different. And this is already that was 19 something. That was probably 1970 something. Now we're here in 2025. It really hasn't changed a whole lot. But the only thing we can say is that the younger generation of men who are taking over their father's farms don't have quite the same work ethic that Dad did. Yeah, and the farmers are saying, oh, my son, like, I don't know, I can't rely on him, right?
Yeah.
That old man said he couldn't rely on his son to be there. And another farmer told us that his son, his son ostensibly took over the working operations of the farm, and Dad was trying to, like, not do too much. But he goofed. The greenhouse needs a particular temperature, and it's very sensitive, and you have to be very careful about that. And apparently the son just totally forgot, and and totally goofed it. And his father was so angry, and so these kinds of things, anyway, happen.
Reminds me of one of my favourite cartoons, actually, which I saw. So it was called Young MacDonald. So you can see old MacDonald through the window out with the tractor, but young MacDonald is playing a video game on his bed, and it's going beep beep, cheep cheep.
Yeah, that's how it is. So I mean, if we study these farms 20 years from now, it will be interesting to see what's going to happen. But yes, the bride shortage is still there. It's not going away, and I wonder if farms are going to somehow have to consolidate and be a kind of a cooperative, farm cooperative, or but I don't know about the legal aspects of this, and I think there are many things about land ownership in Japan that would, and laws about that would have to change in order for that to happen, in order to make, to compile farms and not have an owner but have stocks or shares or something like that. I think maybe that's part of the future, but isn't happening yet. Maybe somebody knows more about that than I do.
Okay.
Helen?
I think I see Helen's hand up there. Yeah.
Hi, Glenda. It's lovely to see you. I have two separate questions.
Uh-huh.
One is, I assume that a lot of these migrants coming in are male. I get the sense they're predominantly male. Is that true?
Depends.
Depends.
Yeah.
Okay.
Some farmers actually prefer females.
Okay.
Yeah,
I just wondered what the
because,
gender balance was and whether that was
depends
creating
on what
any.
job it's going to be. So the cut flower people seem to like to have women doing it, or the
Right.
cut leaf, because it's very fine, fine work, and they say that women are better at that. But if it's physical heavy work, like you saw cabbages or something piled up, right? They'd rather have men do it. So it really depends on what kind of farming.
Okay, so it's not particularly male dominated. It depends on the sector.
It might be. There may be more men than women. I haven't looked at it recently, but it's not like hugely skewed towards men.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
My
But
second question.
Construction is totally different.
Yeah, of
Construction is
course.
mostly
Yeah.
men,
Yeah. My second question was related to what just came up. So I'm from New Zealand, obviously, and dairy farming has changed substantially in the last 20 to 30 years, and it's become reliant on machinery and reliant on huge corporations taking over from individual landowners, for better or worse. And I just wondered if there was any of that happening, because it seems that it could be ripe for the plucking of big corporations, Japanese corporations.
We did study, we saw only one dairy farm. We had a really interesting conversation with that man. He was sort of semi-automated. He did have some machines, doing the milking, but he still needed workers to put the machines on the teats to make it happen. And he wanted to further automate, but he couldn't afford it. He would have had to take out another huge loan in order to do that. So he wasn't going to do it right away. And also other prices were going up, like feed. And that was even, I think we talked to him during COVID. So I think it's probably even worse now, because prices in the United States have gone up and up with inflation. And then in Japan, the yen has gone down and down with the exchange rate. So it's really hard for them. But Hokkaido is really the dairy farming place. And this I'm sure it's much more automated in Hokkaido and much bigger operations. But the thing is that the man here in Kyoto Prefecture told us, well, their milk, if it comes from far away, it's not going to be any good. We need local dairy. We don't want to just rely on Hokkaido milk.
Right, okay.
Thank you very much. The thing which we have no idea about is what people's experience is in this audience of farming. And I think that probably not that many people in the audience have lived on a farm or worked on a farm.
Okay, raise your hand. How many?
Okay, well, I'm not actually even asking for that, but I'm saying we don't know. Now, having been very involved in farming, both here and in Japan, I'm rather concerned about your comments as though they're generalities, and I think we must be careful not to assume that's the whole of Japan. It's your experience. Now, there have been comparisons between this country and Japan, and about 20 years ago, when I was working with a particular part of the Japanese government, they asked me to organize a visit by people from the Ministry of Agriculture in Japan to the Ministry of Agriculture here, which I did. And that was because they were very concerned about the number of suicides amongst farm workers. Very high and much higher than the average situation. Now, I don't know whether you considered any of those points. You talked about being bystanders, but I think that it is important we look at evidence that exists, because even now we know there is a high number of suicides in this country of agricultural workers.
And in France. There's a high number in France. I've heard that about France. Frankly, I have not heard that there's a particularly high rate of suicides among farmers in Japan. I haven't heard that. Nobody has mentioned that. None of our, it hasn't come onto my radar. So I don't know what I could say about that. They don't have, and as you pointed out, of course, we're just talking about a particular sector of farmers. We're not talking about rice farmers. We're talking about these vegetable, fruit, and greenhouse flower farmers.
Well, I'm
right?
talking about farmers in the broad context.
Okay, but all I can say is that from our experience talking with these farmers in 2 prefectures, they are worried about the future, definitely, but I have not heard about any particular suicides or mental illness issue that they have. In terms of workers, we heard quite a bit about farmers' wives having to step in and try to make the workers feel better or try to settle arguments and that sort of thing. And farmers also said it was difficult at first having to, they didn't speak, the farmers don't speak the Chinese, they don't speak Vietnamese, most of them. Most of them haven't learned the languages of their workers, and they're counting on the workers learning Japanese. So if you can imagine bringing somebody into your household who doesn't speak your language and then trying to have them help you on the farm and trying, learn the procedures, it must have been very hard at first. And I think it was, but now they have much more experience, and they're managing, they're doing it. And their farms are continuing. Right? If they don't have these workers, they can't manage. They have to bring these foreign workers in.
Okay, now there was a question. Did you still have a question? Yeah. Yeah.
Hello. Hi. Thank you very much for a wonderful presentation, Professor Roberts. To close. This actually resonates a lot with my own experience because your presentation of migrant workers. I was a migrant worker in Japan, but not in the agricultural sector. I was more in the car sector, the automotive car, and Aichiken actually.
Yes.
I am a Nikkei, and I saw your graph is mainly Asian.
That's right.
Migrant workers.
That's right. It's not auto. So I'm not in agriculture. There aren't many, if any, Nikkei-jin.
That's what I want to ask you. Have you come across? Because I know Nikkeis do many unskilled.
They mostly do
jobs.
The automotive industry.
Yes, there are others.
Yeah, but not farming. As far, there may be a few, but they weren't in the statistics. They don't exist. They must be other. There's a little tiny wedge of other, and they could very well be in that other, but they're not in the thousands. No.
And one more question. And according to your presentation, it appears that one of the issues is also accommodation, isn't it? The adaptation to the Japanese culture. That's what the Japanese farmers fear in a way.
Worried about.
That how would they adapt?
That's right.
And how would they be welcome within the community in a way?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Actually, as a kind of follow-up on that, I was
Yeah.
wondering, your first photograph on your very first slide.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Is
Can
that?
can we go back to it?
Yeah, I can probably get you back to it. Let me see.
Okay. There, this one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the bathroom behind. I mean, the shower room behind. This is the egg farm.
Right.
Okay, and they did their laundry. They have a washing machine, and so they did their laundry and they hung it out. This is a very remote area, and it's really cold in the wintertime. It doesn't snow that much, but it's freezing cold. There's this big forest behind the egg farm, and the I didn't give you that photo, but they have these kind of prefab little structures that people is their bedroom. You know, they have several of those. But if you want to go out in the middle of the night to use the loo or something, you have to go out of your house. You have to go out of your bedroom and into the freezing cold air. So I think it's probably pretty tough in the wintertime to do that job. But those are the egg ladies.
Right. Yeah, I was wondering if that was actually the bedroom, but
No.
not quite
They
as
have
bad
a
as
better,
that.
and actually they put Wi-Fi in.
All right.
Yeah. So when we were there, I think maybe 2019, it was just before COVID, and they were putting Wi-Fi into those rooms. So before that, they didn't have Wi-Fi, and now they have Wi-Fi. So that's a big improvement because it means that they can actually, you know, talk to their family back home and connect with other people. Yeah.
And what about the 2 levels? I mean, are they meant to jump from one level to another?
No, it's just not that high.
Well,
It's just a step.
dangerous.
It's just a step. It's just
Trip hazard. I think. Yeah. Okay, there's the question from the lady in the second row here.
When the migrant, when the migrant workers come to Japan,
right.
do they wish to stay permanently?
Okay, so this is a good question, and I didn't study the workers. I studied the farmers, so I can't tell you one way or another, but I can tell you this, and that is that generally speaking, if they come on TITP, many of them want to stay for SSW, and many of them have stayed for SSW. Now, how many SSW1 workers will actually make that big, huge leap to SSW2? That is another question altogether.
Well, if there's no prospect for them,
There's a slight prospect. But in agriculture, so this is the question, right? Like if you get stuck in agriculture and you're there for 8 years and then you cannot manage to pass that language exam and the skill test in agriculture, what are you going to do, right? And I think
even if they pass,
yeah.
If there's no prospect for them, there's no point of passing it.
You're right, and I wonder about that too, but we will have to see.
Come to earn as much as possible within a limited period so that they can sort of build their own house in their own country, like
some of them
migrant workers in this country.
Yes, absolutely. They build their own house. They have children and spend remittances on their educations. One reason that farmers don't really think it's a good idea for people to stay too long is because they worry that they will be apart from their families for too long. Like there's two sets of workers, I would say. One is the young worker who comes at maybe age 20 or so and is not married, okay, and then stays maybe until they're 28 or something, and then they go home and they get married. Yeah. If they didn't go home at that point, then farmers said to me, well, they might miss the marriage window and they'll never be able to get married if they stay here forever. Okay.
They never get married to each other then, these migrant workers?
Well, I wouldn't say never. I wouldn't say never. But Okay, so up until now, these workers haven't been allowed family reunification, right? So even if, like, let's say you're an SSW worker and I'm an SSW worker and we're married, they wouldn't put us in the same farm. No, and indeed, farmers said to me, oh, and when I said to them, well, couldn't you just put them together because they're a married couple? They said, oh, I don't think that would work very well because the other workers would be jealous because the other workers' families are back home, and I don't know how that would work, so I wouldn't want to do that.
Okay. Right. There's a question in the gloom at the back there. I don't know why it's so dark back there, by the way.
Oh.
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, yeah.
My question is slightly different and perhaps outside your immediate research interest.
I can't see where you are.
Sorry, I'm over here, yeah.
Okay, I see.
So I just wanted to diversify the topic slightly, if I may. When you interviewed the farmers, and I've got no farming background at all, actually.
Okay.
The issue here, I think, is labor shortage and dwindling income streams for the potential farmers.
That's right.
Who can't survive. So I was just wondering if, when you met the farmers, there might have been discussions on diversification and also diversification of income. And I'm thinking here particularly about generating domestic tourism into farms with the possibility of farm stays, testing out farms for school children or even families, providing accommodation for them, perhaps camping, because camping is very popular in Japan.
Right.
So this could expand into an income stream for the potential farming community. Also give experience to local Japanese families who might want to experiment in different farms. So it would be a win-win situation. But also that could be expanded for foreign tourism, because there's a lot of foreign tourism in Japan. And I think the Japanese government is quite keen to attract tourists away from the main tourist destinations into other areas as well.
Yeah, you're right.
It just seems to me that there might be potential to do that. Was that discussed at all, or do you have any examples of how that could be possible?
Not at all.
It'd be scope to develop that. Thank you.
I think the farmers see it as their family business. And I think they would be reluctant to cede any control to random tourists who were interested in staying on the farm, or I just don't think they would want to do it. But I might be wrong. And maybe the young farmers would like to do it, okay? Young people coming from the cities who want to start a farm, and actually the Japanese government has a program where they subsidize these farmers heavily, these young people, okay? Those people might want to do it because they're not necessarily going into it for money. They're going into it for kind of a lifestyle change because they're sick of working as a salaryman and they don't like the life of the city. And they might be more open to those kinds of practices, I
think there are some particularly organic farms and that kind of thing which have foreign volunteers working for them. Yeah, it looks like Joy has something to say on this topic.
Well, I heard a talk the other day by a woman in Kyushu who was doing just what you described.
Okay.
She was bringing children on to learn about farming techniques as youngsters in the local school. Sorry, I can't remember her name, but I could easily find it out if you're interested, or certainly Glenda might be interested. And there are people doing exciting things. And I've got a question if I've still got time, which is how characteristic are the two Aichi-ken and Kyoto to the rest of Japan? Because my experience in Kyushu is a little bit different, but the farmers are actually doing quite well and carrying on, even growing flowers in greenhouses. So,
well, I'm not sure about how old they are in Kyushu.
There are Vietnamese workers, and there are young people coming through still enough to keep it. But we can talk about that afterwards. I don't know how characteristic that is of the area.
We chose Kyoto and Aichi because of the government program. There were only 4 places that the government, had this interim program before they started SSW1. So that's why we chose those areas.
Okay, and you want to, there's something here.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Can I just ask?
Just for the live stream.
I'm probably okay, actually. I've got a rather big voice. Can I just ask, has the Japanese government looked at models in other countries and looked at those? Because I come from the east of England, and we had a lot of migrant workers in the late 90s, early 2000s, very much from Eastern Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Has the Japanese government looked at other scenarios internationally, and any particular
Sure.
that come to mind?
Korea. They've looked at Korea. Yeah, but Korea also has short-term labor migration policies. So they definitely look to Korea. And Taiwan. But I think the Japanese government is quite concerned to try to be humane about this, and to try not to have a program that never lets people stay longer and longer in the country without ever having access to permanent residency, and perhaps citizenship if you so desire. Okay, and there are many activists in Japan who are concerned about that. They do not want people to come into the country and never have access to permanent residency, never have access to becoming a citizen if they want it. In Korea, I don't believe you have access to that on the short-term labor programs. And in Taiwan, you certainly do not have access to it. But in Japan, it's a different situation, and it's very interesting to me that they started this program and finally they're saying, okay, yes, we understand family reunification for people who have already spent so long in Japan is the thing to do. So I give them kudos for that. The only problem is they're so worried about they're so worried that there may be problems developing in the future, that they want to make sure that these people who come and stay have enough language acquisition and have enough, skill and so forth. They're extremely risk averse, the government is. And therefore, they made those tests for SSW2 quite difficult to pass, right? And the farmers even said so, yeah? But I think it'll be a matter of time. And I'm sure that there will be some farms who hire SSW2 workers. And you can move within the sector, okay? So it's possible that some of these SSW2 people will go into food processing instead of farm work. I'm not sure. That's just off the top of my head. And I haven't talked to the MOJ about that yet. But farmers themselves are worried that workers will not want to stay in farming because it's so difficult and it doesn't pay that much.
Okay, another one, Maggie. Sorry, I didn't spot you. I'll do that one next.
Can I make a quick point following on from that very important farming experience in the north of England? I think there's one thing that it's difficult for us to understand. Even now, in the common market, which we have left, the common language is still English.
Right.
And people actually speak English to each other within Europe and nearby countries. Mm-hmm. And unfortunately, there's no similarity in that part of the world where Japan is.
That's right.
And I think life is much easier for us, however difficult we find it. But it's much easier
that's
in
right.
reality because of English
Yes.
being the language of the scientific paper.
Yeah. No,
Right.
well, and teaching language is a difficult endeavor, right? And of course, the farmers aren't going to do it. And they have volunteers in the community who are trying to teach language in the evening maybe a few days a week. But these are volunteers. They are getting paid at a very, very low level, and they don't have necessarily the skill to be a language teacher. Okay, it's out of the kindness of their heart that they're trying to teach Japanese. It's not enough. So I'm trying to encourage the government, whenever I can, to come up with a system of language education with the same, with textbooks that you can give to every level, each level, differentiated, and a systematic way to learn Japanese, and then give those textbooks to people in the community who are doing these jobs, or better yet, pay professionals to do it or supervise it, because language, as you say, is so important, and Japanese is it. You have to learn Japanese if you're in Japan. If you have to do it.
But it's hard when you're working, especially if you're working
yes, and they're
very
tired.
long hours.
Yeah, you're working long hours, you're tired. You only have one day a week, perhaps, to do something else. It's easy to say, oh, well, just do it in your free evenings or whatever. But nevertheless, there are some people who manage, some workers do manage to learn.
Okay, can we take your question then?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you for the wonderful presentation. I was quite interested by the comments about the younger Japanese workers, Japanese farmers who moved from the urban areas to the rural areas in Japan, and who kind of are interested in the countryside lifestyle. And I feel like a lot of them are interested in organic agriculture and also introducing new technology. So do you think there's,
I'm not sure about the technology part.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, I was just wondering, so alongside these new programs, like the new one coming up in 2027, is the government also thinking about investing in introducing new technology to improve the efficiency of agriculture and production?
Yes, it certainly is. And these farmers actually have implemented new technologies, but there's only so far that you can go. The technology can't, with the cut leaf, like shiso, you have to package it. In order to package this shiso, they said that a machine won't do it very well because it gets caught in the leaves. I mean, it's nothing like human hand to put those shiso leaves together and put them in a package. So, I mean, they do use new technologies. Like they use the dairy farmer who was trying to mechanize. He had mechanized to a certain extent, but then of course you need a lot of money to do it all the way, right? As far as young farmers, whether they're interested in that, I'm not. If they're not already a farmer, if they didn't grow up in a farming family and they didn't go to agricultural school like all these guys did. I have a graduate student. She's no longer a student. She got her PhD, but she studied some farmers in Wakayama, young farmers, I-turn farmers in Wakayama Prefecture. And it was a very interesting dissertation. She stayed with them for about a year and got to know them. What she told us in her dissertation was that there was only a small percentage of them that were doing it as a business, that wanted to make money and that were being very efficient, and they were concentrating on making only tomatoes, and that was it, and they were just really, really working very, very hard. But many of them that she studied were burned out from their jobs in the city, and they wanted to take it easy and do a little bit of organic farming, and then they maybe do some online computer, they needed to make a little bit of cash because they had, you might have to pay taxes or this sort of thing. So they had a little side business to make a little bit of cash, but mainly they were just enjoying this whole making organic farming and
a new lifestyle.
Yeah. And they also did a lot of sharing. So if your jacket became torn or something, maybe you can turn it in to someone else will give you one, and then you give them something else. And there was a lot of this sharing of food around, like I have too many pumpkins, how about you? Oh, you know, I have too much corn. Okay, let's switch. And that kind of thing. But they weren't making a lot of money.
Yeah, so I just have one more question regarding the food's self-sufficiency problem in Japan. Like, considering that, you know, many of the trainees and workers came from Vietnam and the Philippines, like, obviously, like in the next 10 or 20 years, these countries would also develop like China.
Yes.
So would this program be long-term sustainable?
And that's probably another reason why SSW2 came on board, to try to encourage people to stay, you know, to put roots in Japan, to have their children be educated in Japan, and stay for the long term. I know that the Japanese government wants to make like a Japan that is mirokuteki, right? Like attractive to foreign migrants. They can see the handwriting on the wall.
Right, I know that there were probably still some questions that we didn't get around to, but I think it's time we went downstairs and had a drink. But you're very welcome to approach Glenda directly and carry on the conversation downstairs. So let's give her a round of applause for a very interesting talk. Yeah.
Thank you.